The crack of a gunshot shattered the quiet darkness as Sophia Hayes clutched her bleeding arm and ran blindly through the night, her breath coming in ragged gasps that turned to vapor in the cold Colorado air. It was 1873, and she had finally done what she'd been planning for months. She had escaped from Vernon Hayes, the husband who had made the last 3 years of her life a living hell. Sophia had married Vernon at 19, charmed by his wealth and standing in Denver society. The son of a successful mine owner, Vernon had courted her with promises of comfort and security. Her father, deep in debt after a series of failed investments, had practically pushed her into the marriage. The beatings had started just weeks after the wedding ceremony, once they'd moved to Vernon's remote property outside of town. Tonight had been different only in its severity. When Vernon had raised the whiskey bottle to strike her again, something inside Sophia had finally broken free. She'd grabbed the small Derringer pistol he kept in his desk drawer and fired it at him in desperation. The bullet had only grazed his shoulder, but it had given her the chance to flee into the night. Now she stumbled through the darkness, her silk nightgown torn and bloodied, her feet bare and bleeding from the rough terrain. The late October air bit at her skin, but fear and desperation drove her onward. She had no plan beyond putting as much distance between herself and Vernon as possible before sunrise. After what felt like hours, Sophia collapsed against a large boulder, her body shaking from cold and exhaustion. The moon had disappeared behind thick clouds, leaving her in almost complete darkness. She could hear nothing but the wind through the pines and the occasional call of a night creature. Her arm throbbed where Vernon's bullet had grazed her, and she pressed her hand against it, trying to stem the bleeding. "Please," she whispered to the empty night, "someone help me." As if in answer to her desperate prayer, the sound of hoofbeats reached her ears. Sophia froze, terror gripping her. Had Vernon recovered quickly enough to come after her? She pressed herself against the boulder, trying to make herself invisible in the darkness. The rider slowed his horse, and Sophia heard the creak of leather as he dismounted. Her heart hammered so loudly in her chest she was certain he would hear it. "Hello," a deep male voice called out. "Is someone there?" The voice wasn't Vernon's. This man's tone was lower, with a slight drawl that spoke of Texas or perhaps Oklahoma. Sophia remained silent, unsure whether to reveal herself. "I know someone's there," the voice continued. "I can help you if you're hurt." A match flared in the darkness, illuminating the face of a man in his late 20s. His features were angular but not harsh, framed by dark hair that curled slightly under his hat. He held the match high, scanning the area around him. The light caught Sophia's pale face, and the man's eyes widened in surprise. "Madam," he said, taking a step toward her, "are you all right?" Sophia tried to press herself further back against the rock. "Stay away," she managed to say through chattering teeth. The man stopped immediately. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said gently. "My name is Ethan James. I've got a ranch about 3 miles from here." He gestured to the east. "I was heading back from town when I thought I heard a gunshot. Was that you?" Sophia didn't answer. The match burned down to the man's fingers, and he dropped it, striking another one immediately. "You're hurt," he said, noticing the blood on her arm and nightgown, "and you're freezing." "Let me help you?" "My husband will kill you if he finds you helping me," Sophia whispered. Ethan's jaw tightened. "Your husband did this to you?" Sophia nodded, feeling tears well up in her eyes. "Madam, I don't know your situation, but I can't leave you out here to freeze or bleed to death. My ranch is nearby. I can take you there, get you warm, tend to that wound. You'd be safe for the night at least." "He has a gun," Sophia said, her voice breaking. "He'll come looking for me." "I've got guns too," Ethan replied simply, "and neighbors who'll stand with me." He removed his coat and held it out to her. "Please, take this at least." The genuine concern in his voice finally broke through Sophia's fear. She reached out with trembling fingers and took the offered coat. It was still warm from his body, and the scent of leather, horses, and pine enveloped her as she wrapped it around herself. "What's your name, madam?" Ethan asked as he helped her to her feet. "Sophia," she replied, then hesitated before adding, "Sophia Hayes." "Well, Mrs. Hayes, let's get you somewhere safe." He led her to his horse, a sturdy palomino that stood patiently waiting. "Can you ride?" "Yes," she said. Her father had taught her as a child, though Vernon had forbidden her from riding once they were married. Ethan nodded and helped her up onto the saddle before swinging up behind her. His arms came around her to take the reins, creating a cocoon of warmth that made Sophia realize just how cold she had been. "Hold on," he instructed, and then they were moving through the darkness at a steady pace. Sophia's mind raced with fear and uncertainty. She had no idea who this man truly was or if she could trust him. But the alternative was to remain alone in the wilderness, waiting for Vernon to find her or for the cold to claim her life. At least with Ethan James, she had a chance of surviving the night. "My ranch isn't much," Ethan said after they had ridden in silence for several minutes, "but it's coming along. I've been working it for 3 years now." He spoke in a low, calm voice, as if sensing her need for reassurance. Sophia found herself gradually relaxing against him, the steady rhythm of the horse and the warmth of his body lulling her into a state of exhausted semi-consciousness. "Stay awake, Mrs. Hayes," Ethan said firmly when he felt her slump against him. "We're almost there, but I need you to stay with me." Sophia forced her eyes open, focusing on the pain in her arm to keep herself alert. "I'm sorry," she murmured. "Nothing to be sorry for, just don't want you falling off the horse after making it this far." There was a hint of kind humor in his voice that reminded Sophia of her older brother, who had died in the war years ago. Soon, a small cabin came into view, with a barn and corral nearby. A dog began barking as they approached, a large shape bounding toward them through the darkness. "That's just Rex," Ethan assured her. "He sounds fierce, but he's friendly enough once he knows you're not a threat." The dog, a large black and brown hound, circled the horse excitedly as Ethan brought them to a stop in front of the cabin. He slid off first, then reached up to help Sophia down. Her legs buckled as her feet touched the ground, and Ethan caught her before she could fall. "Easy now," he said, supporting her weight effortlessly. "Let's get you inside where it's warm." The interior of the cabin was simple but neat. A fire smoldered in the stone hearth, casting a warm glow over the main room. A wooden table with 4 chairs occupied one corner, while a rocking chair and small bookshelf sat near the fire. Through an open doorway, Sophia could see a bedroom with a neatly made bed. Ethan guided her to the rocking chair and helped her sit. "I'll build up the fire and get some water heating," he said. "Then we'll take a look at that arm." As he moved about the cabin, adding wood to the fire and putting a kettle on to boil, Sophia found herself watching him with a mixture of wariness and gratitude. He moved with the easy confidence of a man accustomed to taking care of himself, his actions efficient and purposeful. "How long have you been married, Mrs. Hayes?" Ethan asked as he gathered clean cloths and a small wooden box that presumably contained medical supplies. 3 years, Sophia replied, her voice barely audible. Ethan nodded but didn't immediately press for more information. Instead, he brought a basin of warm water and knelt beside her chair. "I need to look at your arm, if that's all right." Sophia hesitated, then nodded, carefully removing his coat and extending her injured arm. The sleeve of her nightgown was torn and stained with blood. "I'll need to push up the sleeve," Ethan said, his eyes meeting hers to ensure she understood. When she nodded again, he gently rolled the fabric back, exposing the wound. It was a deep graze along her upper arm, still seeping blood but not as severely as before. "Bullet?" he asked, his voice tight. "Yes," Sophia whispered. "He fired as I was running away." Ethan's jaw clenched, but his hands remained gentle as he cleaned the wound. "It's not too deep, won't need stitching, but we'll need to keep it clean to prevent infection." As he worked, Sophia found her gaze drawn to his face. In the firelight, she could see that his eyes were a deep green, framed by long lashes that any woman would envy. A scar ran along his jawline, thin and white against his tanned skin. He was handsome in a rugged way, different from Vernon's polished city looks. "Have you been out here long?" she asked, needing to break the silence that had fallen between them. "About 3 years," Ethan replied, carefully applying a salve to her wound. "Came west after the war. Wanted open spaces and a fresh start. You fought in the war. Yes, madam, Union Army, Tennessee and Georgia campaigns. He wrapped a clean bandage around her arm with practiced ease. That should hold for now. Are you hurt anywhere else? Sophia shook her head, though in truth her entire body ached from Vernon's earlier blows. Those bruises, however, were hidden beneath her clothing, and she wasn't prepared to reveal them. You must be hungry, Ethan said, rising to his feet. I've got some stew I can heat up, and there's bread from yesterday. You don't need to, Sophia began, but Ethan cut her off with a gentle smile. I'd be a poor host if I let you go hungry. Besides, you need your strength. As he moved to the small kitchen area to prepare food, Sophia became acutely aware of her state of dress. She pulled his coat more tightly around herself, embarrassed by her torn nightgown and bare feet. Sensing her discomfort, Ethan disappeared into the bedroom and returned with a flannel shirt and a pair of woolen socks. These will be too big, but they're clean and warm, he said, placing them on the arm of the rocking chair. You can change in the bedroom. I'll wait out here. Gratitude washed over Sophia. Thank you, she said, taking the offered clothes and making her way to the bedroom on unsteady legs. Once alone, she quickly shed her ruined nightgown and pulled on Ethan's shirt. It hung almost to her knees, the sleeves extending well past her hands. She rolled them up as best she could, then sat on the edge of the bed to pull on the thick socks. They were indeed too large, but the warmth was heavenly on her cold, battered feet. When she emerged, Ethan had set 2 bowls of steaming stew on the table, along with chunks of bread and 2 mugs of coffee. He had his back to her, giving her a moment to compose herself before turning. Better, he asked, his eyes briefly taking in her appearance before politely looking away. Much, thank you. Sophia made her way to the table and sat down, suddenly aware of how famished she was. The stew was simple but delicious, rich with beef and vegetables, and the bread, though slightly stale, tasted wonderful when dipped in the broth. They ate in companionable silence for a while before Ethan finally spoke. Mrs. Hayes, I don't mean to pry, but I need to understand your situation if I'm going to help you. Sophia set down her spoon, her appetite suddenly diminished. What do you want to know? Your husband, what will he do when he realizes you're gone? He'll come looking for me, Sophia said, her voice hollow. Vernon is possessive. He considers me his property. The kind of man who beats his wife isn't the kind to let her go easily, Ethan agreed grimly. Does he know this area? Would he think to look for you here? Sophia shook her head. I don't think so. Vernon rarely leaves Denver except to check on his father's mining interests. He doesn't associate with. She trailed off, realizing how her words might sound, with simple ranchers. Ethan finished for her, a hint of amusement in his eyes despite the seriousness of the conversation. No offense taken, Mrs. Hayes. It's actually better if he underestimates folks out here. I shot him, Sophia blurted out suddenly, before I ran. I don't think I hurt him badly, but I shot him with his own gun. Ethan's eyebrows rose slightly, but he showed no other reaction to this revelation. Self-defense, I'd call it. The law might not see it that way. Vernon has connections in Denver. His father is friends with the territorial governor. Well, we're not in Denver, Ethan said simply. And out here, a woman has the right to defend herself, especially from a husband who'd put a bullet in her arm. He paused, studying her face. Do you have family you can go to, somewhere safe? Sophia shook her head. My parents are dead. My brother died at Gettysburg. There's an aunt in Boston, but I have no way to reach her, and Vernon would look for me there anyway. What about friends? Vernon isolated me. I wasn't allowed to maintain friendships after we married. Saying it aloud made Sophia realize just how thoroughly Vernon had cut her off from any potential support. Ethan nodded slowly, as if her words confirmed something he had already suspected. Well, you're safe here for tonight. Tomorrow we can figure out what to do next. I can't stay here, Sophia protested. I've already put you at risk just by being here. If Vernon finds me, if your husband comes looking for trouble, he'll find it, Ethan interrupted, his voice suddenly hard. I don't take kindly to men who hurt women, Mrs. Hayes. And neither do my neighbors. The conviction in his voice was so strong that Sophia found herself believing him, at least a little. For the first time since she'd fled her home, she felt a small flicker of hope that she might actually escape Vernon's control. "Now," Ethan continued, his tone softening, "you should get some rest. You can take the bed. I'll sleep out here by the fire." "I couldn't take your bed," Sophia protested. "You can and you will," Ethan replied firmly. "You've been through enough tonight without having to sleep on the floor." Too exhausted to argue further, Sophia nodded in acceptance. "Thank you, Mr. James, for everything." "Ethan," he corrected her, "and you're welcome, Mrs. Hayes." "Sophia," she offered in return. "Please call me Sophia." A small smile curved his lips. "Good night, Sophia. Try to get some sleep. You're safe here." As Sophia settled into Ethan's bed, pulling the quilt up to her chin, she wanted desperately to believe his words. But the fear that had been her constant companion for 3 years wasn't so easily banished. She lay awake for a long time, listening to the quiet sounds of Ethan moving about in the main room, before exhaustion finally pulled her into a fitful sleep, filled with dreams of Vernon's rage and the endless sound of hoofbeats in pursuit. Sophia woke with a start, momentarily disoriented by the unfamiliar surroundings. Sunlight streamed through a small window, illuminating the simple bedroom. The events of the previous night came rushing back to her, and she sat up quickly, wincing at the pain in her arm. The smell of coffee and frying bacon drifted in from the main room, along with the sound of quiet movement. Sophia pushed back the quilt and swung her legs over the side of the bed. Her body ached all over, and when she examined her arms in the morning light, she could see the bruises from Vernon's last beating beginning to darken against her pale skin. A soft knock sounded at the door. "Sophia, are you awake?" Ethan's voice called quietly. "Yes," she replied, hastily pulling the sleeves of his shirt down to cover the worst of the bruises. "There's hot water in the basin if you'd like to wash up, and breakfast is nearly ready whenever you are." "Thank you, I'll be out shortly." Sophia found the basin of warm water on the small stand in the corner of the room, along with a sliver of soap and a clean cloth. She washed her face and hands, then did her best to tame her long auburn hair with her fingers, wishing for a brush. Her reflection in the small mirror above the stand was a shock. Her right cheek bore a yellowing bruise from where Vernon had struck her 2 days ago, and dark circles shadowed her eyes. She looked like a ghost of the vibrant young woman she had once been. When she emerged from the bedroom, Ethan was at the stove, turning bacon in a cast-iron skillet. He glanced up at her entrance, his expression carefully neutral as he took in her appearance in the daylight. "Morning," he said. "How's the arm?" "Sore, but better, thank you." Sophia hesitated, unsure of what to do with herself in this stranger's home. "Coffee's hot," Ethan said, nodding toward a pot on the table. "Help yourself, breakfast will be ready in a minute." Sophia poured herself a cup of the strong black coffee, grateful for something to do with her hands. Ethan's dog, Rex, who had been lying by the door, rose and padded over to her, sniffing curiously at her borrowed socks. "He won't bite," Ethan assured her, noticing her nervous glance at the large animal. "He's just getting to know you." Tentatively, Sophia extended her hand, allowing the dog to sniff her fingers. After a moment, Rex licked her hand and wagged his tail, apparently deciding she was acceptable. "He likes you," Ethan observed as he transferred bacon to a plate and cracked eggs into the hot fat left in the pan. "Rex is a good judge of character." A few minutes later, they were seated at the table with plates of bacon, eggs, and biscuits that Ethan had warmed by the fire. Sophia hadn't realized how hungry she was until the food was in front of her, and she ate with an appetite that surprised her. "We need to talk about what happens next," Ethan said after they had eaten in silence for a while. "Your husband will be looking for you." Sophia set down her fork, her appetite suddenly gone. "I know. Do you want to go back to him?" Ethan asked directly. "No." The vehemence of her response surprised even Sophia. "No," she repeated more calmly. "I can't go back. He'll kill me this time." Ethan nodded as if her answer confirmed what he had already believed. "Then we need to get you somewhere safe, somewhere he won't think to look." "There's nowhere," Sophia began, but Ethan cut her off. "There's always somewhere. The question is how far you're willing to go to get away from him." Sophia stared at him, considering his words. "I have no money," she said finally. No possessions except what I'm wearing. How am I supposed to start over with nothing? You'd be surprised how many folks out here started with nothing, Ethan replied. Myself included. Before Sophia could respond, Rex suddenly lifted his head, ears perked. A moment later, the dog was on his feet, growling low in his throat as he faced the door. Ethan rose swiftly, moving to the window. He peered out cautiously, then turned to Sophia with a grim expression. Riders coming, 3 of them. Fear clutched at Sophia's heart. Vernon, can't tell yet. But they're coming fast. Ethan moved to a cabinet and extracted a rifle, checking it quickly before grabbing a box of ammunition. Go into the bedroom, stay low and quiet. Sophia hurried to obey, her heart pounding in her chest. Through the partly open door, she watched as Ethan loaded the rifle and positioned himself near the window, his movements calm and deliberate despite the tension evident in his posture. The sound of hoofbeats grew louder, then stopped. Rex continued to growl, the sound rumbling deep in his chest. "Ethan James," a voice called from outside. "You in there?" The tension in Ethan's shoulders eased slightly. "That's Frank Miller from the next ranch over," he said to Sophia. "Stay there for now." He moved to the door, rifle still in hand, and opened it partway. "Morning, Frank." "What brings you by so early?" "Got trouble, Ethan. There's men from Denver asking questions at the trading post, looking for a woman who ran off last night, offering good money for information." Sophia's blood ran cold. Vernon had wasted no time in sending men after her. What kind of men? Ethan asked, his voice casual though Sophia could see the tension in his stance. "Hard types. Hired guns by the look of them. Said the woman shot her husband and stole valuables before running off. They're offering $50 to anyone who can tell them where she is." $50 is a lot of money, Ethan observed. "It is," Frank agreed. "Which is why I figured I'd better get here before anyone else thinks to point them in this direction." There was a pause, and Sophia held her breath, wondering if Ethan would deny her presence or hand her over for the reward. "I appreciate the warning, Frank," Ethan said finally, "but I'm not sure why you'd think they'd come here." Frank snorted. "Because Sam at the livery mentioned you rode in late last night and your horse looked like it had been carrying double. Sam's not one to talk, but $50 might loosen his tongue." Sophia closed her eyes in despair. She had brought danger right to Ethan's door. "I see," Ethan said. "Well, I'm obliged for the warning. There's more," Frank continued. "Tom and I rode out to check your south fence line like you asked, found tracks this morning. Someone rode out there last night or early this morning. Might be nothing, but thought you should know." "Appreciated," Ethan replied. "You and Tom want to come in for coffee?" "No time. We're heading back to warn the others. These Denver men don't look like the type to ask nicely, if you take my meaning. The community should know." "I'll ride over to Harlan's place later, spread the word that way," Ethan said. "Thanks again, Frank." After a few more exchanged words, Sophia heard the riders depart. Ethan closed the door and turned toward the bedroom. "You can come out now," he called. Sophia emerged, her face pale with fear. "They're looking for me already," she whispered. "I should go." "I can't put you in danger." "And where exactly would you go?" Ethan asked reasonably. "On foot, in borrowed clothes, with no supplies or money. How far do you think you'd get before they found you? Or before the elements did?" Put so bluntly, the futility of running was obvious. Sophia sank into a chair, fighting back tears of frustration and fear. "What am I going to do?" Ethan set the rifle down and took the seat across from her. "We need to get you somewhere safe, somewhere your husband's men won't think to look, and we need to do it soon." "But where?" "You heard your friend, they're already asking questions at the trading post." Ethan was quiet for a moment, his brow furrowed in thought. "I have a friend," he said finally. "Thomas Quinn has a ranch about 70 miles west of here, near the mountains. He owes me a favor, and he's not the type to ask too many questions." 70 miles, Sophia repeated, daunted by the distance. 2, maybe 3 days' ride, Ethan confirmed, "but it would get you well away from here, give you time to decide what to do next." Sophia stared at him, trying to understand his motivation. "Why are you helping me? You don't know me. I could be exactly what those men are saying, a thief who shot her husband." A small smile curved Ethan's lips. I know enough. I've seen what your husband did to you. No woman deserves that, and no man who would do that to his wife deserves loyalty. He paused, his eyes holding her steadily. Besides, Rex likes you, and as I said, he's a good judge of character. Despite the dire circumstances, Sophia found herself returning his smile. When would we leave? As soon as possible. Those men will be checking every homestead in the area once they realize people aren't talking. We should be gone before they get here. Ethan rose and began moving about the cabin with purpose. I'll gather supplies while you get ready. There's a spare set of riding clothes in the chest in the bedroom. They belonged to my sister before she married and moved east. They might fit you well enough for the journey. Sophia blinked in surprise. You have a sister? Had two, actually. Mary's in Pennsylvania now with her husband. Sarah died of fever 2 winters ago. A shadow passed over his face at the mention of his deceased sister. I'm sorry, Sophia said softly. Ethan nodded in acknowledgement. Sarah was about your size. The clothes might be a bit loose, but they'll be better for riding than what you have now. In the bedroom, Sophia found the chest at the foot of the bed and opened it to discover neatly folded women's clothing. She selected a brown riding skirt, cream-colored blouse, and a woolen shawl that would provide warmth against the autumn chill. There were even stockings and a pair of small boots that looked like they might fit her. As she dressed, her mind raced with questions and doubts. Could she trust Ethan James? Was she making another mistake in agreeing to ride 70 miles with a man she had just met? But what choice did she have? Vernon's men were already searching for her, and it was only a matter of time before they found their way to Ethan's ranch. By the time Sophia emerged from the bedroom, Ethan had packed food, blankets, and other supplies into saddlebags. He looked up as she entered, his eyes widening slightly at her transformed appearance. The clothes fit well enough, Sophia said, smoothing the unfamiliar skirt. The boots were a bit large, but with an extra pair of stockings they would serve. They suit you, Ethan replied, his gaze lingering for a moment before he turned back to his preparations. I've packed enough food for a few days. We'll need to travel light and fast, avoid the main trails. What about your ranch? Can you just leave it? Frank and the others will keep an eye on things. It's not unusual for ranchers to help each other out in these parts. Ethan checked the loads in a pair of revolvers before holstering one and offering the other to Sophia. Do you know how to use this? Sophia hesitated. I know how to fire a gun, but I'm not very skilled. It's simple enough. Point and pull the trigger. Just be sure of your target first. He showed her how to check if the gun was loaded and how to hold it properly. Keep it with you, just in case. The weight of the revolver was unfamiliar but reassuring as Sophia tucked it into the pocket of her riding skirt. For the first time since her escape, she felt a sense of control over her situation. Ethan strapped on his gun belt and donned his hat and coat. We'll take the 2 horses. Firefly is gentle enough for you to handle, and she's got good endurance. We'll head west through the high country where the terrain will make us harder to track. As they stepped outside, Sophia took her first proper look at Ethan's ranch in the daylight. It was modest but well-maintained, with a small barn, corral, and what appeared to be the beginnings of additional structures. A stream ran nearby, and beyond that, open pasture stretched toward distant hills. It's beautiful, she said softly. It's a work in progress, Ethan replied, but she could hear the pride in his voice. I'm hoping to build it up over the next few years, maybe add some cattle to the horses I've been breeding. He led her to the barn, where 2 horses were already saddled. One was the Palomino he had ridden the night before, the other was a smaller chestnut mare with a white blaze down her face. This is Firefly, Ethan said, patting the chestnut's neck. She's steady and sure-footed. She'll take good care of you. Sophia approached the mare cautiously, allowing the horse to sniff her hand before gently stroking her nose. Hello, Firefly, she murmured. Ethan helped her mount, adjusting the stirrups to accommodate her shorter legs. How does that feel? Strange, Sophia admitted. It's been years since I've ridden. It'll come back to you, Ethan assured her. He mounted his own horse, then whistled for Rex, who bounded over excitedly. Ready? Sophia took a deep breath, looking back at the cabin that had provided her first safe haven in years. Yes, she said, turning resolutely forward. I'm ready. They set off at a steady pace, Ethan leading the way west toward the distant mountains. Rex loped alongside them, occasionally darting off to investigate interesting scents before returning to their side. The day was clear and crisp, the autumn sun providing warmth without the intensity of summer heat. As they rode, Sophia found herself studying Ethan James more carefully. In the daylight, she could see that he was perhaps 30, with the lean, muscular build of a man who worked hard for his living. The scar along his jawline was more noticeable now, a thin white line that spoke of a violent encounter sometime in his past. Despite the wariness in his eyes, a wariness she suspected came from his experiences in the war, there was a fundamental kindness to his features that she found reassuring. "How long have you lived out here?" she asked after they had ridden in silence for some time. 3 years, Ethan replied. "Came west after the war ended, spent a year working cattle drives before I saved enough to claim my own land." "You built that cabin yourself?" "With some help from neighbors. People help each other out here, have to survive." He glanced over at her. "What about you? You're not from Colorado originally, are you?" Sophia shook her head. "Pennsylvania. My father moved us to Denver 5 years ago. He had investments in mining that. Didn't work out as he hoped, and that's how you met your husband." "Yes, Vernon's father owned several successful silver mines. My father hoped a marriage between us would save him from financial ruin." Sophia's voice was bitter as she added, "It didn't. He died anyway, leaving my mother and me dependent on Vernon's generosity." "And your mother died last year, consumption." Sophia swallowed hard at the memory. "Vernon wouldn't let me nurse her at the end, said she might infect me." Ethan's expression darkened. "Your husband sounds like a real piece of work." "He wasn't always like that," Sophia said, feeling a strange need to explain. "Or perhaps he was, and I just didn't see it. He was charming during our courtship, attentive. The beatings started after we were married, once we moved to his property outside Denver." "That's often how it happens," Ethan said quietly. "They show their true nature once they think they own you." Something in his tone made Sophia look at him sharply. "You sound like you speak from experience." Ethan was silent for a long moment before responding. "My mother remarried after my father died. Her new husband seemed decent enough at first, but once the wedding was over." He trailed off, his jaw tight with old anger. "I was 14 when I finally got big enough to stop him. Told him if he ever touched my mother or sisters again, I'd kill him." "Did he stop?" "He did. Left, actually. Last I heard, he died in a bar fight in Kansas City." Ethan's tone made it clear he shed no tears over the man's demise. They rode on in companionable silence after that, each lost in their own thoughts. By midday, they had covered considerable ground, following game trails and less traveled paths that wound through increasingly rugged terrain. Ethan kept them moving at a steady pace, occasionally stopping to let the horses rest and to check their back trail. During one such stop, as they shared a simple meal of jerky, bread, and dried apples, Sophia found herself watching Ethan as he scanned the horizon behind them, his expression focused and alert. "You think they're following us?" she asked. "No sign of it yet," Ethan replied. "But we should assume they will be once they find my ranch and realize you were there." The reminder of the danger she had brought to his doorstep filled Sophia with guilt. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "You've given up so much to help me, your home, your safety. Why?" Ethan turned to look at her, his green eyes serious. "Because it's the right thing to do, and because no one deserves to live in fear, especially not at the hands of someone who claimed to love them." His simple, straightforward answer touched something deep within Sophia. For years, Vernon had told her she was worthless, that no one would help her if she tried to leave, that she deserved the beatings he gave her. Yet here was a stranger risking everything to help her escape. "Thank you," she whispered, her eyes filling with tears she refused to let fall. Ethan looked uncomfortable with her gratitude. "We should keep moving," he said, packing away the remains of their meal. "There's a place about 3 hours from here where we can camp for the night, old trapper's cabin that's still solid enough to provide shelter." As they continued their journey, the terrain became more challenging, with steeper slopes and denser forest. Sophia's muscles protested the long hours in the saddle, but she made no complaint. Every mile they traveled was another mile between her and Vernon, another step toward freedom. By late afternoon, dark clouds had gathered on the horizon, promising rain or perhaps early snow. The temperature dropped noticeably, and Sophia pulled her borrowed shawl more tightly around her shoulders. "Weather's coming in," Ethan observed, glancing at the sky. "We'll need to reach shelter before it hits." They pushed on at a faster pace, the horses sensing their rider's urgency. Rex had ceased his carefree explorations and now trotted purposefully alongside Ethan's horse, as if he too understood the need to find shelter. Just as the first fat raindrops began to fall, a small cabin came into view, nestled against a rocky outcropping that provided some natural shelter from the elements. It was crude but solid-looking, with a stone chimney and a small lean-to that could house the horses. "Made it just in time," Ethan said as thunder rumbled in the distance. He dismounted quickly and helped Sophia down, her legs stiff and sore from the day's ride. "Get inside while I tend to the horses." The interior of the cabin was dusty and sparse, containing only a rough table, a bench, and what appeared to be a platform bed built against one wall. A fireplace dominated the opposite wall, and Sophia was relieved to find a stack of firewood beside it, dry and ready to use. By the time Ethan came in with their saddlebags, Sophia had started a small fire and was sweeping years of dust from the floor with a crude broom she had found in the corner. "You work fast," Ethan commented, shaking rainwater from his hat before hanging it on a peg by the door. "It keeps me from thinking too much," Sophia admitted. The simple domestic task had indeed helped calm her racing thoughts, giving her hands something useful to do while her mind processed the dramatic changes of the past 24 hours. Outside, the storm increased in intensity, rain lashing against the small windows and wind howling around the eaves of the cabin. Rex settled himself near the fire, wet fur steaming slightly in the heat. "Horses are secure in the lean-to," Ethan said, unpacking food from their supplies. "They'll be dry enough there." Sophia nodded, suddenly very aware of their isolation and the intimacy of sharing such a small space. In the cabin, with just the fire for light and the storm raging outside, it was easy to forget the circumstances that had brought them together. Too easy to notice the way the firelight played across Ethan's features, highlighting the strong line of his jaw and the surprising gentleness in his eyes when he looked at her. To distract herself, Sophia focused on preparing their simple dinner. They ate in companionable silence, the crackling of the fire and the drumming of rain on the roof the only sounds. After they had finished, Ethan took their tin plates outside briefly to rinse them in the rain. When he returned, his hair damp from the downpour, he found Sophia standing awkwardly by the fire, her expression uncertain. "You should take the bed," he said immediately, understanding her dilemma. "I'll sleep on the floor by the fire." "You've already given up so much," Sophia protested. "I can't take your comfort as well." "It's not a hardship," Ethan assured her. "I've slept on worse during the war." He spread his bedroll on the floor near the hearth, then turned his back discreetly to allow her privacy as she prepared for sleep. Sophia removed her boots and outer clothing, leaving on the borrowed blouse and a petticoat for modesty. The platform bed had a thin straw mattress covered with what appeared to be a relatively clean blanket. She lay down, pulling her shawl over herself for additional warmth, and turned to face the wall. "Good night, Ethan," she said softly. "Good night, Sophia," came his quiet reply. Despite her physical exhaustion, sleep eluded Sophia. Her mind refused to quiet, filled with images of Vernon's rage, fear of his men finding them, and confusing new thoughts about the man sleeping just a few feet away. The storm continued outside, occasionally illuminating the cabin with flashes of lightning followed by the rumble of thunder. After what felt like hours, Sophia heard Ethan's breathing deepen into the rhythm of sleep. Only then did she allow herself to turn over, watching the play of firelight across his features. In repose, his face lost some of its guardedness, making him appear younger and more vulnerable. What kind of man was he, really? In the span of a day, he had taken in a stranger, tended her wounds, defended her against pursuers, and now was guiding her to safety at considerable risk to himself. Such selflessness seemed almost unreal after the years she had spent with Vernon, who never did anything that didn't directly benefit himself. Eventually, lulled by the steady sound of rain and the warmth of the fire, Sophia drifted into sleep. Her dreams were a confused mixture of fear and hope, running from shadowy pursuers one moment, feeling safe in strong arms the next. She woke with a start sometime in the night, disoriented and frightened by a particularly loud clap of thunder. A soft whimper escaped her before she could stop it. "Sophia," Ethan's voice came from the darkness, alert despite having been asleep moments before. "Are you all right?" "Yes," she whispered. "Just the storm. I'm sorry I woke you." "You didn't." She heard him shift, and then the fire flared as he added another log. In the renewed light, she could see him sitting up, watching her with concern. "Bad dreams," Sophia nodded, embarrassed by her weakness. "It seems childish to be afraid of thunder when there are much more real dangers to fear." "Fear isn't always rational," Ethan said. "God knows I've woken in a cold sweat often enough from the sound of thunder. Takes me right back to the artillery barrages during the war." His admission of his own vulnerabilities made Sophia feel less alone. "Does it get easier? The fear, I mean." "Some days," Ethan replied honestly. "Other days, not so much, but you learn to live with it, to not let it define you." Sophia considered his words, drawing comfort from them. "Thank you," she said finally, "for everything. I know those words are inadequate, but they're all I have to offer." Ethan's expression softened in the firelight. "Get some sleep, Sophia. We have another long day tomorrow." She lay back down, pulling the shawl up to her chin, and this time sleep came more easily, her fears temporarily held at bay by the quiet strength of the man keeping watch nearby. Morning arrived with clearing skies and a freshness to the air that spoke of the passing storm. Sophia woke to find Ethan already up and moving about the cabin, rekindling the fire and preparing a simple breakfast of coffee and hardtack. "The storm's passed," he said, when he noticed she was awake. "But it's left the trails muddy. We'll need to be careful today." Sophia sat up, brushing her hair back from her face. "How far do we still have to go?" "If we make good time, we could reach Thomas's ranch by tomorrow evening, but with the muddy conditions, it might take longer." Ethan handed her a cup of coffee. "How are you feeling? Sore from yesterday's ride, I'd imagine." Sophia accepted the coffee gratefully, acknowledging his assessment with a rueful smile. "Every muscle I didn't know I had is protesting, but I'll manage. We'll take it slower today." "No sense pushing too hard and risking injury to you or the horses." He paused, studying her face. "Your arm wound needs checking, and you've got some color back in your cheeks. That's good." His concern warmed Sophia in a way that had nothing to do with the fire or the coffee. After so long being treated as property rather than a person, Ethan's genuine care for her well-being was like water to parched soil. They set out shortly after breakfast, the world around them washed clean by the night's rain. The forests and meadows they passed through were vibrant with autumn colors: gold, crimson, and russet leaves standing out against the deep green of the pines. Under different circumstances, Sophia would have found the journey beautiful. As Ethan had predicted, the going was slower due to muddy trails and swollen streams. They had to detour several times to find safe crossing points, adding miles to their journey. Despite these challenges, Sophia found herself enjoying the ride more than she had expected. The physical discomfort of being in the saddle was offset by the growing sense of freedom that came with each mile traveled. "Tell me about Thomas Quinn," she said as they picked their way along a narrow ridge trail. The valley spread out below them in a panorama of autumn splendor. "The friend we're going to see." "Thomas is a good man," Ethan replied. "Met him during the war. He was a scout for our regiment, has a way with horses that borders on magical. After the war, he came west and started a horse ranch in the foothills. Does well for himself selling to the army and to settlers passing through." "How did he come to owe you a favor?" A small smile played at the corners of Ethan's mouth. I helped him out of a tight spot in a saloon in Denver 2 years back. Some card players took exception to his winning streak and decided to express their displeasure with knives. I happened to be passing through and evened the odds a bit. You fought for him? Sophia asked, trying to imagine Ethan in such a confrontation. Let's just say I helped convince the gentlemen that their grievances weren't worth pursuing. There was a glint in his eye that suggested there was more to the story, but he didn't elaborate. And you think he'll help me? Thomas isn't one to turn away someone in need, especially not a friend of mine, and his ranch is remote enough that your husband's men aren't likely to come looking there. Ethan glanced over at her. Besides, he could use the help. His housekeeper left last month to get married, and he's been managing on his own since then. The implication was clear. Sophia could earn her keep at Thomas's ranch, perhaps stay long enough to decide what to do next. The prospect of having a purpose, of being useful rather than merely decorative as Vernon had insisted she be, was appealing. They stopped for a brief rest around midday, sharing the last of the bread and some dried beef. Sophia found herself watching Ethan as he checked their back trail through a small spyglass, his movements efficient and purposeful. "Do you see anyone?" she asked, unable to keep the anxiety from her voice. "No signs of pursuit," Ethan assured her, "but that doesn't mean they're not out there." "Your husband seems like the persistent type." "He is," Sophia confirmed grimly. "Vernon doesn't give up easily, especially when his pride is involved, and I wounded both his pride and his shoulder when I shot him." Ethan regarded her thoughtfully. "You're stronger than you realize, you know. Many women would never have found the courage to leave, let alone to defend themselves as you did." His words caught Sophia by surprise. No one had called her strong before. Certainly not Vernon, who had systematically undermined her confidence over the years, convincing her she was weak, helpless, and entirely dependent on him. "I don't feel strong," she admitted. "I feel frightened most of the time. Courage isn't the absence of fear," Ethan said quietly. "It's doing what needs to be done despite being afraid. By that measure, you're one of the bravest people I've met." Sophia felt her cheeks warm at the unexpected compliment. "Thank you," she murmured, not knowing what else to say. They continued their journey through the afternoon, gradually descending from the higher elevations into a series of rolling hills and valleys. The terrain was becoming less rugged, the forests giving way to scattered groves interspersed with open meadows. As the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, Ethan led them to a small clearing beside a stream. "We'll camp here tonight," he said, dismounting and helping Sophia down from her horse. "There's good water and enough grazing for the horses." While Ethan tended to the animals, Sophia gathered firewood and cleared a space for their camp. The domestic tasks gave her a sense of normalcy that had been missing from her life for too long. Vernon had servants for such work, and considered it beneath his wife's dignity to engage in manual labor of any kind. By the time Ethan returned from settling the horses, Sophia had a small fire going and was arranging their meager supplies for the evening meal. "You're becoming quite the frontier swoma," Ethan observed with a smile as he approached the campfire. "Hardly," Sophia replied, returning his smile, "but it feels good to be useful." They worked together to prepare a simple dinner, moving around each other with an ease that belied their short acquaintance. As darkness fell, they sat side by side near the fire, the night sounds of the wilderness creating a peaceful backdrop to their conversation. "What will you do after we reach Thomas's ranch?" Sophia asked, watching the play of firelight across Ethan's features. He considered the question for a moment. "Head back home, I suppose. Check on the ranch, see if your husband's men came calling." "Aren't you worried about what might happen if they did?" "Some," Ethan admitted. "But I've got friends in the area who would have stepped in if there was trouble, and I couldn't just leave you to face them alone." His simple statement of protection touched Sophia deeply. "You barely know me," she said softly, "yet you've risked everything to help me." Ethan's gaze met hers, the firelight reflecting in his green eyes. "Sometimes you just know what's right, even if it doesn't make logical sense." Something shifted between them in that moment, a connection forming that went beyond rescuer and rescued. Sophia felt it like a physical thing, a warmth that had nothing to do with the nearby fire. For the first time in years, she felt truly seen as a person, not merely as a possession or an ornament. The moment was broken when Rex suddenly lifted his head, ears perked forward, a low growl rumbling in his chest. Ethan was instantly alert, one hand moving to the revolver at his hip. "What is it?" Sophia whispered, fear clutching at her heart. "Not sure," Ethan replied, rising silently to his feet. "Stay here by the fire." He moved into the darkness beyond the circle of firelight, Rex at his heels. Sophia watched anxiously, straining her eyes to see into the surrounding gloom. Had Vernon's men found them after all? The weight of the revolver in her pocket was suddenly very present in her mind. After what seemed an eternity but was probably only a minute or two, Ethan returned to the fireside, his posture relaxed. "Just a deer passing through," he said. Rex was being cautious. Sophia released the breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "I know," Ethan said, sitting beside her again, "but we're safe for now, and tomorrow we'll reach Thomas's ranch." Despite his reassurance, the moment of fear had reminded Sophia of the precariousness of their situation. "Will I ever be truly safe?" she asked, the question slipping out before she could stop it. "Vernon has money and connections, if he's determined to find me." "He won't look forever," Ethan said with quiet confidence. "Men like your husband, they're prideful. Eventually, his pride will demand that he act as though you never mattered to him. He'll likely divorce you in absentia for abandonment, tell society some story that makes him the wronged party, and move on. You seem to understand him well for someone who's never met him." "I've met his type before," Ethan replied, a hint of bitterness in his tone. "Men who build themselves up by tearing others down, who measure their worth by how much they can control those around them." He paused, then added more gently, "You deserve better, Sophia. You deserve to be with someone who sees your strength and values it, not someone who tries to break it." His words warmed her, but they also awakened a sadness deep within. "After Vernon, I'm not sure I could ever trust a man again," she admitted. "How could I know that someone wouldn't change once I was in his power?" Ethan was quiet for a long moment before responding. "I can't answer that for you. Trust comes hard after it's been broken. All I can say is that not all men are like Vernon Hayes." The conviction in his voice made Sophia want to believe him, but 3 years of Vernon's cruelty had left deep scars, not all of them visible. "We should get some rest," Ethan said finally. "Tomorrow will be another long day." He spread their bedrolls on opposite sides of the fire, maintaining a respectful distance that Sophia appreciated even as she found herself wishing, in some small corner of her heart, that he was closer. As she lay looking up at the stars visible through the gaps in the trees above, Sophia allowed herself to imagine, just for a moment, a future where she might be free of fear. A future where she might find the courage to trust again, to perhaps even love again. It seemed an impossible dream, but for the first time in years, it didn't feel entirely out of reach. Morning dawned clear and crisp, with a hint of frost silvering the grass around their campsite. Sophia woke to find Ethan already up, tending to the horses and preparing for the day's journey. She rose quickly, folding her bedroll and helping to pack their meager supplies. "If we make good time, we should reach Thomas's ranch by nightfall," Ethan said as they mounted up. "The terrain gets easier from here." They rode through rolling hills and open meadows, the landscape gradually changing as they descended into the valley that, according to Ethan, contained Thomas Quinn's ranch. The air grew warmer as the day progressed, the autumn sun pleasant on Sophia's face. For the first time since her escape, Sophia found herself thinking beyond immediate survival. If Thomas Quinn was willing to give her shelter, perhaps she could begin to build a new life for herself, far from Vernon's reach. She had skills that might be useful. She could read and write well, keep accounts, and while her domestic abilities had atrophied during her years as Vernon's wife, she had been a capable cook and seamstress in her youth. "What are you thinking about?" Ethan asked, breaking into her thoughts. "You've been quiet for miles." "The future," Sophia replied honestly. Trying to imagine what mine might look like now, Ethan nodded, understanding in his eyes. One day at a time, he advised. That's how I got through the war and the months after. Just focus on today, and eventually the future takes care of itself. It was simple advice, but profound in its way. Sophia had spent so much of her marriage either dwelling on the past, remembering happier times, before Vernon revealed his true nature, or anxiously anticipating the future, wondering when the next beating would come. The idea of simply living in the present moment was both novel and appealing. As the afternoon wore on, they began to see signs of habitation, fenced fields, a distant herd of horses grazing on a hillside, and finally, smoke rising from what appeared to be a chimney. "That's Thomas's place," Ethan confirmed, pointing to a cluster of buildings nestled in a protected valley. "Looks peaceful, doesn't it?" It did indeed. The ranch was larger than Ethan's, with a substantial main house, a large barn, several corrals, and what appeared to be bunkhouses for ranch hands. Fields of autumn golden grass surrounded the buildings, and a stream wound through the property, its banks lined with cottonwoods showing the last of their yellow leaves. As they approached, a large dog began barking, alerting the household to their presence. Rex answered with a bark of his own, apparently recognizing a friend. A tall, broad-shouldered man emerged from the barn, shading his eyes against the setting sun as he watched their approach. As they drew closer, he suddenly straightened, recognition evident in his posture. Ethan James. He called out, striding toward them. "Of all the people to come riding in, what brings you to my neck of the woods?" Ethan dismounted, a genuine smile lighting his features as he greeted his friend. "Thomas Quinn, still as ugly as ever, I see." The two men clasped hands warmly, then embraced in the way of old comrades. Thomas Quinn was a striking figure, tall and powerfully built, with dark hair streaked with silver at the temples and a neatly trimmed beard. His eyes were a startling blue against his sun-darkened skin. "And who's this lovely lady?" Thomas asked, turning his attention to Sophia with a courteous nod. "This is Sophia Hayes," Ethan said, helping her dismount. "Sophia, meet Thomas Quinn, the finest horseman west of the Mississippi and a passable card player when he's sober." Thomas laughed, the sound rich and genuine. "Don't believe a word he says, Mrs. Hayes. I'm an excellent card player regardless of my state of sobriety." His smile faded slightly as he took in Sophia's appearance more carefully, noting the fading bruise on her cheek and the way she held herself, as if expecting a blow. Understanding dawned in his eyes, and he glanced at Ethan with a raised eyebrow. "Sophia needs a safe place to stay for a while," Ethan said simply. "I thought of you," Thomas nodded, accepting the explanation without pressing for details. "You've come to the right place," he said to Sophia. "Any friend of Ethan's is welcome here," he gestured toward the house. "Come inside. You both look like you could use a hot meal and a comfortable place to rest." The interior of Thomas's home was surprisingly refined for a bachelor's dwelling in the wilderness. The main room was spacious and well-furnished, with a large stone fireplace, comfortable chairs, and bookshelves lining one wall. A dining table of polished wood occupied one corner, already set for a meal. "Maria from the bunkhouse has been cooking for me since Beatrice left," Thomas explained, noticing Sophia's surprised glance at the domestic arrangements. "She keeps things in order, though she's not one for cleaning. I've been meaning to hire a proper housekeeper, but good help is hard to find out here." "Sophia is educated," Ethan said, catching Thomas's meaning immediately. "Reads and writes well, keeps a good household from what I've seen." Thomas looked at Sophia with new interest. "Is that so? Would you be interested in a position here, Mrs. Hayes? Room and board plus wages. It would be honest work, and you'd be treated with respect." The offer was exactly what Sophia had hoped for, yet she hesitated, glancing at Ethan. The thought of him riding away, returning to his own ranch while she remained here with strangers, filled her with unexpected dismay. Ethan's expression gave nothing away as he waited for her response. But there was something in his eyes, a shadow of regret, perhaps. That made her wonder if he shared her reluctance to part ways. "Thank you, Mr. Quinn," she said finally. "That's very generous. I would be grateful for the opportunity." "Excellent," Thomas clapped his hands together. Now let's have dinner and you can tell me what brought you to my doorstep. I suspect there's quite a story there. Over a hearty meal of venison stew, fresh bread, and apple pie, Ethan explained the situation to Thomas, omitting some details but making it clear that Sophia was fleeing an abusive husband who had resources and connections. Denver Society A. Thomas mused, refilling their coffee cups. That explains the fine manners. Well, Mrs. Hayes, you're welcome to stay as long as you need. The room at the top of the stairs is yours. It has its own small sitting room attached, so you'll have privacy. Thank you, Sophia said, overwhelmed by his generosity. I don't know how to repay such kindness. Keep my house in order and help with the accounts, Thomas replied with a wave of his hand. I was never one for paperwork, and the ledgers have gotten away from me since Beatrice left. Beyond that, consider yourself a guest rather than an employee, at least until you find your feet. As the evening progressed, Sophia found herself relaxing in the companionable atmosphere. Thomas Quinn was a natural storyteller, regaling them with tales of his and Ethan's wartime experiences that somehow managed to find humor in even the darkest situations. For the first time in years, Sophia found herself laughing freely, the sound almost foreign to her own ears. Eventually, Thomas excused himself, citing early morning chores, and showed Sophia to her room before retiring to his own quarters. The room was simple but comfortable, with a 4-poster bed, a small desk, and a window that overlooked the valley. Will you be comfortable here? Ethan asked from the doorway, having accompanied her upstairs to carry her few possessions. Yes, Sophia replied, turning to face him. It's more than I could have hoped for. An awkward silence fell between them, filled with words unsaid and feelings unacknowledged. Sophia was acutely aware that once morning came, Ethan would likely begin his journey back to his own ranch. The thought of never seeing him again created an ache in her chest that surprised her with its intensity. Ethan, she began, then faltered, unsure of what she wanted to say. You're safe here, he said, misinterpreting her hesitation. Thomas is a good man, he'll look after you, I know, it's not that. Sophia took a deep breath, finding courage she hadn't known she possessed. I just wanted to thank you, not just for bringing me here, but for showing me that there are still good men in the world. After Vernon, I had begun to doubt that. Ethan's expression softened. There are good people everywhere, Sophia, even in the darkest times, you just have to know where to look for them. I'm glad I found you, she said simply. For a moment, Ethan looked as though he might say more, might step across the threshold that separated them, both literally and figuratively. But then he seemed to catch himself, offering her a gentle smile instead. Get some rest. We can talk more in the morning. With that, he withdrew, closing the door softly behind him. Sophia stood looking at the closed door for a long moment, feeling both disappointment and relief. Whatever was growing between them, this fragile connection that seemed to defy the brevity of their acquaintance needed time. Time she hadn't had since her escape from Vernon. Sophia sank onto the edge of the bed, suddenly aware of how exhausted she was. The journey had taken its toll, both physically and emotionally. For the first time in 3 years, she was truly free of Vernon's control. The realization was both exhilarating and terrifying. As she prepared for bed, Sophia found herself wondering what the morning would bring. Would Ethan leave immediately, returning to the ranch and life he had put on hold to help her? Or would he stay a while, perhaps long enough for her to understand the feelings stirring within her whenever she looked at him? Sleep claimed her quickly, but her dreams were troubled visions of Vernon finding her, of being dragged back to a life of fear and pain, interspersed with images of Ethan riding away, disappearing into the distance while she called after him in vain. Morning arrived with the soft golden light of autumn sunshine streaming through her window. For a moment, Sophia lay disoriented, the unfamiliar room confusing her sleep-muddled mind. Then memory returned: the escape, the journey, Thomas Quinn's ranch, safety, at least for now. She rose and dressed quickly in Sarah's clothes, which Thomas's housekeeper had washed for her the previous evening. After braiding her hair and pinning it up in a simple style, Sophia made her way downstairs, following the scent of coffee and bacon. The kitchen was empty save for a pot of coffee still warm on the stove and a plate of biscuits covered with a cloth. Through the window, Sophia could see Thomas and Ethan in the corral, working with a spirited young horse. She poured herself a cup of coffee and stood watching them, struck by the easy camaraderie between the two men and their gentle skill with the nervous animal. After a few minutes, Thomas noticed her at the window and waved, saying something to Ethan that made him turn and look toward the house. Even at a distance, the warmth in his smile when he saw her was unmistakable. Sophia found herself smiling back, a flutter of something like hope stirring in her chest. The day passed quickly as Sophia familiarized herself with Thomas's household. Maria, the woman who had been cooking since the previous housekeeper left, was happy to show Sophia the routines of the ranch and introduce her to the handful of ranch hands who worked the property. By afternoon, Sophia had organized the kitchen to her satisfaction and had begun tackling the ledgers Thomas had mentioned, finding the accounts in disarray but not beyond salvaging. Throughout the day, she was aware of Ethan's presence on the ranch, catching glimpses of him working with Thomas in the corral or checking the condition of the fences. Each time their paths crossed, there was a moment of connection, a shared glance or smile that spoke of growing attachment. Yet neither of them seemed ready to acknowledge it directly. As evening approached, Sophia prepared dinner with Maria's help, taking pleasure in the simple domestic task. The meal was a lively affair, with Thomas dominating the conversation with tales of local characters and the challenges of running a horse ranch in the changing West. The railroads coming through the valley next year, he informed them as they lingered over coffee and apple cobbler. Will change everything. Good for business, easier to transport horses, but it'll bring more people, more development. Progress is inevitable, Ethan observed. Question is whether it's progress for the better or worse. Depends on who you ask, I reckon, Thomas replied. For a man like me, it means better prices for my horses and easier access to supplies. For others, he shrugged, change is hard. The conversation shifted to other topics, but Sophia found herself pondering Thomas's words about change. Her own life had changed dramatically in just a few days from captive wife to fugitive to. What? She wasn't sure yet what her new role would be, but for the first time in years, she felt she had a choice in determining it. After dinner, Thomas excused himself to check on a mare that was close to foaling, leaving Sophia and Ethan alone by the fire. The silence between them was comfortable at first, but as it stretched on, Sophia became increasingly aware of the unspoken questions hanging in the air. "When will you leave for your ranch?" she finally asked, voicing the question that had been foremost in her mind all day. Ethan studied the flames for a moment before answering. "I should head back soon. The longer I'm away, the more catching up I'll have to do when I return." Sophia nodded, trying to hide her disappointment. "Of course, you've already done so much, taking so much time away from your own responsibilities." "I don't regret it," Ethan said quietly, his gaze shifting from the fire to her face. "Not a single moment." The intensity in his eyes made Sophia's breath catch. "Neither do I," she whispered. Something shifted between them, a barrier falling away. Ethan moved from his chair to sit beside her on the small sofa, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him, yet not so close as to make her uncomfortable. "Sophia," he began, then paused, seeming to search for the right words. "I know we've only known each other a few days. I know you're still healing from what you've been through, but he trailed off, uncharacteristically uncertain. "What is it, Ethan?" Sophia encouraged gently. "I find myself reluctant to leave," he admitted. "Not just because I'm worried about your safety, though I am, but because—" He met her gaze directly. "Because I've come to care for you in a way I didn't expect, in a way that seems impossible given how short a time we've known each other." Sophia's heart raced at his words, a mixture of joy and fear washing over her. "I feel it too," she confessed. "And it terrifies me," understanding filled Ethan's eyes, "because of what you endured with Vernon. Yes, I trusted him once, believed his promises of love and protection. Look how that ended." Sophia's voice trembled slightly. How can I trust my own judgment again? How can I know that what I'm feeling isn't just gratitude, or that what you're feeling won't change once? She couldn't finish the thought. Once you're truly mine, Ethan supplied gently. Once the excitement of the rescue is over and real life begins. When Sophia nodded, he continued, I can't predict the future, Sophia. I can only tell you who I am today. I'm a man who believes in treating others with respect and kindness. A man who has seen enough violence to last a lifetime and wants only peace. A man who finds himself thinking of you with every breath, yet is willing to walk away if that's what you need. His honesty touched her deeply. I don't want you to walk away, she said, her voice barely above a whisper, but I'm afraid to ask you to stay. Then don't ask, Ethan replied. Let me make the choice freely, as you must make yours. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished, and took her hand in his. I'm not asking for promises, Sophia, just a chance to see where this might lead, at whatever pace feels right to you. The warmth of his hand around hers felt like an anchor in a storm. Sophia looked down at their joined hands, then back up to his face. In his eyes, she saw no demand, no expectation, only honest emotion and patient understanding. I'd like that, she said finally. A chance to see. The smile that lit Ethan's face was like sunrise after a long night. He raised her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. Then I'll stay a while longer if Thomas doesn't mind the company. I suspect he'll be glad of it, Sophia replied, returning his smile. He seems to enjoy having you around. They sat together by the fire, talking quietly of simple things, their childhoods, their dreams before the war had changed everything, books they had read and places they had seen. It was the kind of conversation Sophia had never had with Vernon, who had little interest in her thoughts or experiences. When Thomas returned from the barn, he found them still sitting together, hands entwined, expressions peaceful. He took in the scene with a knowing smile but made no comment, merely joining them by the fire with a fresh cup of coffee and stories of the new foal that had just arrived. The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity as Sophia settled into life at Quinn Ranch. She found satisfaction in bringing order to Thomas's household and accounts, discovering skills she had forgotten she possessed during her years as Vernon's ornamental wife. The ledgers were soon neatly balanced, the pantry organized, and the house running smoothly under her management. Ethan remained at the ranch, helping Thomas with the horses and making improvements to the property that he claimed had been needed for years. If Thomas suspected there was more to Ethan's extended stay than friendship and a desire to be useful, he kept his observations to himself, merely accepting the additional help with good grace. As autumn deepened toward winter, Sophia and Ethan's relationship grew in quiet, measured steps. There were rides together across the valley, conversations by the fire long after Thomas had retired for the night, and moments of shared laughter that helped heal the wounds of Sophia's past. Ethan was unfailingly patient, never pushing for more than she was ready to give, content to let their connection deepen naturally. For Sophia, it was a revelation. Where Vernon had demanded her submission, Ethan sought her opinion. Where Vernon had belittled her interests, Ethan encouraged them. And where Vernon had used his strength to intimidate and control her, Ethan used his to support and protect. One crisp November afternoon, as they rode together along the ridge that bordered Thomas's property, Sophia found herself studying Ethan's profile against the backdrop of snow-capped mountains. In the weeks since their arrival at the ranch, something fundamental had changed within her. The constant fear that had been her companion for 3 years had begun to recede, replaced by a cautious optimism about the future. "What are you thinking?" Ethan asked, catching her gaze. "I was thinking about the day we met," Sophia replied honestly. "How terrified I was. How certain that Vernon would find me and drag me back." Ethan nodded, his expression serious. "You had every reason to be afraid." "Yes, but it's different now. I still worry that he might find me someday, but the fear doesn't consume me anymore." Sophia guided her horse closer to his. "You've given me that gift, Ethan, the ability to hope again." "You gave that to yourself," Ethan countered gently. The moment you decided to escape, to fight back, I just happened to be there to lend a hand. You were there when I needed someone most, Sophia said. When I had nothing to offer in return except trouble. Ethan's gaze softened as it held hers. You've given me far more than you realize, Sophia Hayes. The tenderness in his voice made her heart skip. What have I given you? Purpose, hope of my own. The chance to believe that there might be more to life than just surviving. He paused, then added quietly, the opportunity to fall in love again when I thought that part of me had died in the war. Sophia's breath caught at his words. Love. It was the first time either of them had spoken of it directly, though it had been growing between them, unmistakable yet unacknowledged. Ethan, she began, but he gently interrupted her. You don't need to say anything. I'm not asking for declarations or promises. I just wanted you to know where I stand. His smile was both tender and slightly self-deprecating. Take all the time you need, I'm not going anywhere. Sophia studied his face, the strong lines of his jaw, the warmth in his green eyes, the slight curl of his dark hair where it escaped from beneath his hat. This man who had come into her life like an answer to a desperate prayer, who had shown her through his actions what true strength and kindness looked like. I love you too, she said simply, the words falling from her lips as naturally as breathing. I think perhaps I have since that first night when you offered me your coat and the promise of safety. The joy that transformed Ethan's features was like nothing Sophia had ever seen. He reached across the space between their horses to take her hand, raising it to his lips. Sophia, he murmured against her skin. My brave, beautiful Sophia. They remained there on the ridge for a long while, hands clasped, hearts full, the future stretching before them like the vast landscape that surrounded them, full of possibility and promise. It was Thomas who first brought news that might affect that future. One evening in early December, as snow fell gently outside the windows of the ranch house, he returned from a trip to the nearest town with supplies and information. Heard something interesting at the general store, he said as they sat around the dinner table. Seems there was a notice in the Denver paper about a Mrs. Sophia Hayes, missing and presumed dead after a house fire at her husband's property outside the city. Sophia's hand froze halfway to her mouth, her fork suspended in midair. Dead, she repeated, disbelief coloring her voice. Thomas nodded, his expression grave. According to gossip, the body was too badly burned for proper identification, but jewelry found at the scene confirmed it was you. Your husband is reportedly in deep mourning. Vernon is claiming I died in a fire, Sophia said slowly, trying to make sense of this unexpected development. She looked to Ethan, whose brow was furrowed in thought. It's a convenient story, Ethan observed. Explains your disappearance without the embarrassment of admitting his wife fled from him, and it means he's not looking for me anymore, Sophia finished, the realization dawning. If I'm officially dead, there's no reason to search. Exactly, Thomas confirmed. From what I gather, Mr. Hayes has already left Denver for an extended stay in San Francisco, ostensibly to recover from his grief. A wild, unexpected laugh escaped Sophia. I'm free, she said, wonder in her voice. Truly free. He thinks I'm dead and has moved on with his life. Ethan reached across the table to take her hand. It seems your prayers have been answered, albeit in an unexpected way. God does work in mysterious ways, Thomas commented with a wry smile. Though I suspect this particular miracle had more to do with your husband's pride than divine intervention. That night, as Sophia prepared for bed, there was a soft knock at her door. She opened it to find Ethan standing there, his expression both serious and hopeful. I wanted to make sure you were all right, he said. The news about your death was quite a shock. I'm more than all right, Sophia replied, inviting him into the small sitting room attached to her bedroom. I feel as though a great weight has been lifted. Vernon believes I'm dead. He's moved on. I'm finally free of him in every way. Ethan nodded, taking a seat in one of the small armchairs while Sophia took the other. It's the best outcome we could have hoped for, he agreed, though I admit I had been prepared to defend you if he ever came looking. The quiet determination in his voice warmed Sophia's heart. I know you would have, she said softly, but I'm glad it won't be necessary." They sat in companionable silence for a moment, the only sound the crackling of the small fire in the grate. Outside, snow continued to fall, creating a sense of isolation that felt not confining but protective, as though they were in a world of their own. "Sophia," Ethan began, breaking the silence. "Now that you're free, legally free, since a dead woman can't be married, I find myself thinking about the future. Our future, if you're willing." Sophia's heart began to beat faster. "What are you saying, Ethan?" He rose from his chair and, to her surprise, knelt before her, taking both her hands in his. "I'm saying that I love you, that these weeks with you have been the happiest of my life, that I want to build a life with you if you'll have me." Tears welled in Sophia's eyes, but they were tears of joy rather than sorrow. "Are you asking me to marry you, Ethan James?" "I am," he confirmed, his voice steady though she could feel a slight tremor in his hands. "I'm asking you to be my wife, my partner, my equal in all things. To come back to my ranch with me and help me build something worth having. To grow old with me, surrounded by children and grandchildren, if God sees fit to bless us with them." The sincerity in his eyes left no doubt of his feelings. This was no hasty proposal born of passion or convenience, but a carefully considered offer from a man who knew his own mind and heart. "Yes," Sophia whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Yes, I will marry you, Ethan James." The joy that illuminated his face was like sunrise breaking through clouds. He rose, drawing her to her feet and into his arms. Their first kiss was gentle, tentative, a question and an answer all at once. When they finally parted, Ethan pressed his forehead against hers, his arms still encircling her waist. "I promise you this," he said softly. "I will spend every day of our life together ensuring you never regret this decision." "I know," Sophia replied simply. And she did know, with a certainty that surprised her. This man, this good, honorable man who had risked everything to help a stranger in need, would never betray her trust or raise a hand to her in anger. With Ethan, she had found not just safety but the possibility of joy. They were married 2 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the small church in the nearest town, with Thomas standing as witness. The pastor raised an eyebrow at the bride's lack of family and documentation, but Thomas's standing in the community smoothed over any concerns. Sophia wore a dress of deep blue wool that she and Maria had worked on together, with a spray of dried winter flowers in her hair instead of a veil. Ethan, clean-shaven and dressed in his best clothes, looked at her as though she were the most beautiful sight he had ever beheld. "I take you, Sophia, to be my lawfully wedded wife," he vowed, his voice steady and sure. "To have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do us part." As Sophia repeated the vows, she marveled at how different they felt from when she had spoken similar words to Vernon. Then, they had been merely a social contract, a business arrangement dressed up in the language of romance. Now they were a promise she made with her whole heart to a man who had earned her trust through his actions rather than empty words. "I now pronounce you man and wife," the pastor declared. "What God has joined together, let no man put asunder." Ethan's kiss was gentle but full of promise, a pledge of all that was to come. As they turned to face the small congregation, Thomas, Maria, and a few of Thomas's ranch hands who had come to wish them well, Sophia felt a sense of rightness, of coming home after a long and difficult journey. They spent their wedding night at Thomas's ranch, in a room he had prepared especially for them, giving them privacy while maintaining propriety. Ethan was as gentle and considerate in their marital intimacy as he had been in all other aspects of their relationship, helping Sophia overcome the fear and revulsion that Vernon's brutality had instilled in her. In Ethan's arms, she discovered that physical love could be a source of joy and connection rather than pain and humiliation. A week after the wedding, they prepared to depart for Ethan's ranch. Thomas insisted on gifting them 2 of his finest horses as a wedding present, a sturdy gelding for Ethan and a gentle mare for Sophia. "Consider it an investment in your future," he said, when Ethan protested the generosity of the gift. I expect to see fine colts from these bloodlines in a few years." The morning of their departure was clear and cold, the world transformed by a fresh snowfall that glittered in the winter sunshine. As they loaded the last of their possessions onto the packhorses, Thomas approached with one final gift, a small wooden box. "For you, Mrs. James," he said, presenting it to Sophia with a formal bow that made her laugh. "Something to remember your time here." Inside the box, nestled on a bed of soft cloth, was a silver locket on a delicate chain. Sophia opened it to find a tiny portrait of Ethan on one side, his likeness captured with remarkable skill. "Thomas, it's beautiful," she breathed, deeply touched by the thoughtfulness of the gift. "But how did you manage this without either of us knowing?" Thomas winked. "I have my ways, and talents beyond horses and cards." "He's being modest," Ethan explained. "Thomas was quite the artist before the war, did portraits for extra money when we were in camp." "It's a gift I'm grateful to still possess," Thomas said simply. "Now the other side of the locket is empty, waiting for a portrait of you or perhaps someday one of your children." Sophia's eyes filled with tears as she embraced the tall rancher who had become a dear friend. "Thank you, Thomas." "For everything?" "Your family now," Thomas replied gruffly, clearly uncomfortable with the emotion of the moment. "Both of you, don't be strangers." With final farewells and promises to visit in the spring, Sophia and Ethan set off for their new life together. The journey back to Ethan's ranch took several days, but Sophia found she enjoyed the travel now that it was undertaken without fear of pursuit. They stayed in small towns along the way, registered at hotels as Mr. and Mrs. James, no longer needing to hide or rush. When they finally crested the rise that overlooked Ethan's property, Sophia reined in her horse, taking in the sight of what was now her home. In the weeks since Ethan had left, snow had transformed the landscape, but the cabin looked welcoming with smoke rising from the chimney. Frank Miller had evidently kept his promise to check on the place and prepare it for their return. "It's not much compared to what you were used to in Denver," Ethan said, a hint of uncertainty in his voice as he watched her reaction. Sophia turned to him, her eyes shining with emotion. "It's perfect," she said sincerely. "It's freedom, it's hope, it's ours." The smile that lit his face was all the confirmation she needed that she had found her true home at last. As they rode down the slope toward the cabin, Rex came bounding out to greet them, barking joyfully at their return. "Welcome home, Mrs. James," Ethan said, helping her dismount in front of the cabin that would be their new beginning. "Home," Sophia repeated, savoring the word. "Yes, I believe it is." 10 years later, Sophia stood on the porch of the enlarged and improved ranch house, watching as Ethan taught their eldest son, 8-year-old Thomas, how to gentle a young colt. Their 6-year-old daughter, Sarah, sat on the corral fence, her auburn braids glinting in the summer sunshine as she offered animated advice to her father and brother. Inside the house, 2-year-old Robert was napping under the watchful eye of Mrs. Peterson, the widow from town who helped with the children and household chores. The ranch had prospered over the years, growing from Ethan's modest beginnings to a successful operation that raised both cattle and horses. The railroad that Thomas had mentioned during their first days at his ranch had indeed come through the valley, bringing changes both good and challenging. But through it all, Ethan and Sophia had faced life as true partners, each contributing their strengths to build a home and legacy together. There had been hard times, a drought that nearly ruined them in their 3rd year, the winter when Sarah had fallen ill with pneumonia and they'd feared for her life, the fire that had destroyed the original cabin and forced them to rebuild. But there had been far more joy than sorrow, more laughter than tears. Sophia's hand went to the silver locket that still hung around her neck, now containing miniature portraits of Ethan on one side and their 3 children on the other. It was a tangible reminder of how far she had come from that terrified woman fleeing through the night with nothing but the clothes on her back. Sometimes, in quiet moments like this, Sophia thought about Vernon Hayes. According to occasional news that reached them from Denver, he had remarried within a year of her death to a young woman from a wealthy San Francisco family. She felt no jealousy, only a distant pity for the woman who now bore his name and likely his bruises as well. Her reflections were interrupted by the sound of hoofbeats approaching. Shading her eyes against the afternoon sun, Sophia recognized the tall figure on horseback immediately. "Uncle Thomas," Sarah shrieked, abandoning her perch on the fence to run toward the approaching rider. Thomas Quinn, his hair now more silver than dark but his back still straight and his smile still warm, dismounted to sweep the little girl up in a hug. "Sarah James, you've grown at least a foot since spring," he declared, setting her back down. "Soon you'll be taller than your mother." "That wouldn't be difficult," Sophia laughed, coming forward to greet their old friend with a warm embrace. "Welcome, Thomas. We weren't expecting you until next week." "Business concluded earlier than expected," Thomas explained, clasping Ethan's hand as he approached with young Thomas in tow. "And I was eager to see this fine family of yours. How are you all?" "Thriving," Ethan replied, his arm slipping around Sophia's waist in a gesture that had become as natural as breathing over the years. "And always glad to see you." As they walked together toward the house, Sophia leaned into her husband's embrace, a sense of contentment washing over her. From the darkest moment of her life, that desperate flight from Vernon's cruelty, had come this unexpected joy. A loving husband who treated her as an equal partner. Children who knew nothing of fear or violence in their home, a life built on mutual respect and shared dreams. "Happy," Ethan murmured, seeming to sense her thoughts as he often did. Sophia looked up at him, at the face that had become as familiar and essential to her as her own reflection. The years had added a few lines around his eyes and threads of silver at his temples, but the warmth in his gaze when he looked at her remained unchanged. "Completely," she replied, and it was the simple truth. The woman who had once escaped a husband who beat her had found healing and happiness in the arms of a cowboy who had taken her hand and called her his forever. And forever, it seemed, was only just beginning.